The Windowless house. I grew up in Blackfield, a town so small it barely deserved a dot on the map. Nestled between endless wheat fields and the choking grasp of the whispering woods, our isolation bred a peculiar kind of quiet, the kind that settles into your bones and makes you jump at shadows. That summer of '89 was the hottest on record. The air shimmered like a mirage over the fields, and the cicadas screamed so loud it sounded like the trees themselves were wailing. I was 8 years old, all scraped knees and wild curiosity, spending my days exploring the forgotten corners of our rural world while my grandmother warned me about things that lurk in the between places. I should have listened. The house that wasn't there. It appeared overnight. One moment, the field behind Grant's farmhouse was empty, just golden wheat swaying under a merciless sun. The next, there it stood, a grotesque, boxy structure the color of old bruises. No windows, no porch, just a single black door hanging slightly open, like a slack jaw waiting to swallow whatever wandered too close. The strangest part? No one else saw it. "Quit your fibbing, Eli," Grant snapped when I pointed it out over breakfast. Her gnarled hands clenched around her coffee mug. "Ain't nothing out there but old man Henderson's fallow field." But I saw it. The way the morning light slid right off its warped wooden siding. How the grass around it was dead in a perfect circle, as if something had sucked the life right out of the earth. That afternoon, while Gran napped in her rocking chair, I crept across the field. The wheat hissed against my overalls, and with every step, the air grew thicker, sweeter, like overripe peaches left to rot in the sun. The door groaned when I touched it. Inside, the darkness wasn't natural. It was a living thing, viscous and hungry, lapping at the threshold. My sneakers sunk into something wet, not water, something sticky. Then the door slammed shut behind me. Not from the wind, from the thing that sighed in the corner, the thing in the walls. The voice was wrong. Not deep, not high, just stretched, like multiple people speaking through one ruined throat. "Eliai," it crooned. "We've been waiting." Something skittered across the ceiling. I looked up just as a hand, long fingers, too many joints, slithered out of a crack in the beams. Then another, and another. The walls were breathing. Pale faces pressed against the wood grain, their mouths sewn shut with what looked like black thread. Their eyes, oh God, their eyes, were wide and weeping a thick, amber fluid. One of them was me. My doppelganger grinned, its stitches snapping one by one as it whispered, "You shouldn't have come alone. The game begins." I ran. The door was gone. The floor buckled under me, board splitting to reveal a yawning pit filled with... No, don't think about what was down there. I tripped over something soft. A body small, curled fetal, its skin peeled back to show glistening muscle. It wore my favorite Power Rangers t-shirt. The walls pulsed. The thing in the corner giggled. Then the ceiling split open, and a dozen skeletal arms rained down. Escape, or was it? I woke up in the field at dusk, my clothes crusted with dirt and something dark and flaky. Gran was screaming my name from the porch. The house was gone. But that night, as I lay trembling in bed, something scratched at my window. Tap, tap, tap. A familiar voice, now coming from inside my closet. "Ready for round 2? The return to Blackfield." The hearse rolled past Henderson's fallow field, kicking up dust that clung to my rented suit like old regrets. 20 years. 20 years since I'd last set foot in Blackfield. 20 years since I'd buried the memories of that house deep enough to almost convince myself they were just a childhood nightmare. Almost. The field looked smaller now. The wheat had long since given way to scrub grass and thistles, but the shape of the land was unmistakable. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as my eyes dragged themselves, against my will, to the spot where the nightmare had stood. And there it was. The windowless house. Not a memory. Not a hallucination. It hunched in the afternoon light, like a vulture over carrion, its warped gray boards somehow darker than the shadows around it. The black door gaped open, a maw leading into impossible darkness. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, scalding liquid soaking through my slacks. I barely felt it, because something moved in the doorway. A child, pale as a grub dug from wet soil, its naked skin glistening with something viscous. It had no hair, no eyebrows, just two enormous black eyes that swallowed the light. When it smiled, its lips split like overripe fruit, revealing tiny, needle-like teeth. Eliai, it hissed, my name bubbling up from its throat like tar. We've been waiting for you. Behind it, shapes stirred in the gloom. One by one, they stepped into the light. Children, dozens of them, all naked, all hairless, all with those same bottomless black eyes. And every single one had my face. The faces in the dark. The Eli closest to the door tilted its head at a perfect 45-degree angle. The bones in its neck cracked audibly. You left us behind, it said. The others took up the chant, their voices merging into a single, buzzing drone. Left us, left us, left us, left us. I slammed the car into reverse so hard the tire screamed. The Eli things didn't chase me. They just stood there, smiling, waving with synchronized movements as I peeled away. In the rearview mirror, the house was gone, but I could still hear them whispering. The funeral. Grand's casket was closed. Found her in the rocking chair, Sheriff Dawson told me at the graveside, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, face frozen like she'd seen the devil himself. He didn't mention the black stitches, holding her lips shut, or the way her fingernails had been torn off. The bloody tips pressed into the armrests like she'd been clawing at something only she could see. The mortician handed me a small box. She wanted you to have this. Inside was a single Polaroid, 8-year-old me, standing in front of the windowless house, grinning at the camera. Written on the back in Grand's shaky hand, you signed your name. The first night back, the motel bed creaked under me as I stared at the water-stained ceiling. The Polaroid sat on the nightstand, face down. I didn't need to look at it to see that house, that thing wearing my face. Tap. I sat bolt upright. Tap, tap. Not at the door. At the mirror. My reflection grinned at me, its eyes bleeding black. Behind it, dozens of small, pale hands pressed against the glass from the other side. Let us in. My reflection whispered. We're so hungry. The children who never grew. The air in the field had turned thick and syrupy, as if the atmosphere itself resisted my every breath. The windowless house loomed before me, its warped wooden planks groaning like an old ship at sea. The black doorway yawned wide, exhaling a scent that made my stomach twist, rotting fruit, wet earth, and something metallic, like old blood. The child in the doorway took a step forward. Its skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent, stretched too tight over bones that seemed too sharp, too wrong beneath the surface. Veined spiderweb beneath its flesh, black as ink. Its eyes were pits, yes, but now I saw movement in them. Tiny shapes writhing in the darkness, like maggots squirming in spoiled meat. Come in, it whispered again, and this time, the voice wasn't just in my ears. It vibrated in my skull, in my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. The others emerged behind it. Not just versions of me. Fragments. One had my face, but its jaw hung slack, unhinged like a snake's, strings of saliva swaying as it shuffled forward. Another had my curls, my freckles, but its skin was peeling, strips of it dangling like old wallpaper, revealing glistening muscle beneath. A third was bloated, waterlogged, its skin gray and splitting at the seams, as if it had been pulled from a river after weeks of drowning. The worst one was the smallest. It looked exactly like I had at 8 years old, right down to the Power Rangers t-shirt I'd been wearing the day I first stepped into that house. Only its mouth was sewn shut with thick black thread, the truth in the walls. I stumbled back, but the ground had turned spongy, sucking at my shoes like quicksand. The grass wasn't grass anymore. It was hair, long and fine, tangling around my ankles. The first child, the one with the needle teeth, giggled. A wet, gurgling sound. You don't remember, do you? It asked, tilting its head too far to the side. What you left behind? It reached into its own mouth and pulled. Something ripped. Its jaw stretched, wider, wider, until its face split down the middle like a rotten fruit. And from the gaping hole where its throat should have been, a tiny hand emerged. A hand I recognized. My hand. 8 years old, fingers still chubby with childhood, nails bitten to the quick. It was inside the thing, and it was waving at me. The contract. The bloated one lurched forward, its distended belly splitting open with a sound like tearing fabric. Inside, nestled among coils of glistening intestine, was a glass jar. Floating in murky fluid was a scrap of paper. My stomach dropped. I knew that paper. It was from my old notebook, the one I carried everywhere as a kid. The one I'd used to scribble stories about monsters and adventures. The child's bloated fingers unscrewed the jar, the stench of formaldehyde and decay rolling out in a nauseating wave. It plucked out the paper with delicate, practiced movements, then held it up for me to see. There, in smudged pencil, was my signature, Eli Carter. And beneath it, in handwriting that wasn't mine, a single sentence: I promise to stay forever. The house awakens. The ground trembled. The house shuddered, its planks groaning as they rearranged themselves, the entire structure twisting like a living thing. The roof peeled back, revealing a gaping, toothless maw of splintered wood. And from inside a sound. 1,000 children, whispering my name. The doppelgangers surged forward as one, their hands cold. Too many fingers, clawing at my clothes, my skin, my face. You promised, they chanted, their voices merging into a single, deafening wail. You promised, you promised, you promised. I screamed, and the house screamed back. What came after? They say you can't outrun your past. I learned that day that you can't outrun yourself either. Because when I finally stopped screaming, when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the field anymore. I was inside, and the door was closing. Outside, through the narrowing crack of light, I saw him. Me, the real me, standing in the field, face slack with horror, as the house vanished before his eyes. And then the door shut, and the children, my children, crowded around me, their smiles stretching ear to ear. Now, the first one whispered, pressing its ice-cold forehead to mine. Let's play. Part 4. The game that never ends. The children dragged me deeper into the pulsing house. Their spokesman, face still split in that impossible grin, shoved a rotting notebook into my hands. House rules. Break one equals become furniture. The pages oozed. Hide and seek. If caught, stay forever. Tag. Never let the wet thing touch you. Simon says, obey the man in the walls. The last page gloated. Winner leaves. Just kidding. I chose hide and seek. Mistake. The house stretched into impossible corridors as the children counted with severed hands. I ran past walls peeling open to reveal my worst memories. Age 6, locked in the basement. Age 12, bullies finding my diary. Yesterday, discovering grand stitches. The wet thing cornered me. A distorted version of myself, with frostbite touch. Found you, it gurgled in my voice. I broke rule number 3. I screamed. Silence. Then bang. 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 From inside the walls. Plaster cracked open, revealing a monstrous eye. Yell eye. Boomed 100 children's voices. Tell us a story. The house peeled apart like rotten fruit, vomiting up my life's photographs. I woke in the field, relief flooding me until I saw my reflection. 8 years old. Power Rangers shirt, sparkler in hand. Gran called from the road. Behind her, a new for sale sign stood before a half-built house. No windows, just an open door.